Welcome back, folks. Professor Almeida here, and in this video, I want to walk you through the project I assigned for Access Module 2 in COSA 50. Coming up, you're going to learn all about queries in Access. Now, before we get into this, I want to give you some background as to why you should care about queries, and more importantly, what are we doing with Access anyway? Let's say that you run a book publishing company or any company, you have your own business and you have employees under you, right? You have book reps in this book publishing company. Let's say that you have your employee contact information saved in a Word doc somewhere for whatever reason. And then let's say that your important employee information, such as hiring dates, pay rates, and whatnot, that's in an Excel workbook somewhere else. And then let's say you also have your customers and maybe their contact information is in another Word doc, and then other important details such as how much they've purchased from you, how much they owe you, how much in returns, and all of that other good stuff. Maybe that's in another Excel workbook. What if you can take all of that and put it into one place and then be able to ask questions? For instance, maybe you want to know all of the customers under a certain book rep, or perhaps you're looking for those same customers under that same book rep, but you're only interested in the customers that have purchased more than $10,000 worth of your materials. Okay, so you can do all of that in Access and you'll see how powerful queries can be. Now, this video is going to run long. I don't have a too long didn't watch for you, so I appreciate your patience and understanding. Again, there's a lot to get through in this project. Give yourself enough time, take breaks, and with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, you've seen this before. I have the full ebook open here. And again, chapter 2 is all about queries. As you can see here, chapter 2, querying a database. Let me show you all of the objectives for module 2 here. So in module 1, you learned how to create tables in Datasheet and Design View. You learn how tables are the heart of a database, because once you have your tables and you've populated those tables with some records, you can now ask questions about what's in those tables. So there are a number of different queries we are going to cover here, and you'll see more in chapter 3 where we get into action queries. But for now, we're going to stick with the queries that you see here in this list. So for example, we'll get into regular queries using query design. We'll get into wildcard queries, parameter queries, compound criteria, how to sort data in query results. We'll look at join tables and all of this other good stuff here. And of course, crosstab queries. So all that coming up for chapter 2. Let's get into Access 2 project. Hopefully by now you know how all this works. Remember, you do need Windows because Microsoft Access is only available for Windows. Grab your instruction file, your start file. You'll see the warning here. Make sure you choose keep. And then you have this support file here. It's an Excel workbook. You'll use this later to append records to a table. All right, so let me bring up Windows File Explorer and I'll go to my downloads folder. I'll show you another way to create a backup of your project file. I'm going to right click on my start file, choose copy. I'll click into this empty space here in the downloads folder. I'll choose paste. Right click rename on my new copy and make sure that there's nothing after the 2. Remember, you're just changing the 1 at the end to a 2. I'll hit enter. And then one last thing, I need to right click on my project file, go to properties and check unblock. I'll hit apply and then OK. And from here, I can go ahead and launch my project, and be sure to enable content. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and launch my instructions. So at this point, let's go ahead, take a break so that you can be ready to go, and I will see you on the other side. All right, let's begin. Step 1. Connect Marketing Group is a national company that provides marketing services such as contact research, brand building, and merchandising to retail stores. As a sales analyst, you need to query the database to help make decisions and to answer questions from other employees. Create a query based on the contacts table in Query Design View with the following options to list contacts and their birth dates. So first things first, I'm going to select the contacts table by clicking on contacts in the navigation pane. Remember, you only just need to click once to select. To create a query, go to the Create tab, Queries group, click Query Design. And this brings up Add Tables. You'll see that contacts is selected by default. If contacts is not selected, click on contacts to select and then add selected tables. From here, I can close Add Tables. Now, I need to be able to see all of the fields here. So I'm going to right click on the contacts window and choose size to fit. Now you can also drag like this so you can see everything, but here I'll just right click size to fit. I will also pull up the design grid so that I can see everything here. In part A, add the contact ID, first name, last name, and date of birth fields to the design grid in that order. So for this one, I'm just going to double click on the field names. Again, contact ID, first name, last name, date of birth. Contact ID, and you can see how it appears in the design grid. First name, last name, date of birth. Now, if you make a mistake, you can change the field. If you added one too many, you can close out of this query and start over. So worst case scenario, you can just close out of this and then just begin again. Just like this. Okay, so this is what your design grid should look like. Part B, sort the records in ascending order by last name. So if you look at the design grid, you'll see these rows here. The first row is field, so you have your field names, and then the table that the fields are based on, in this case, the contacts table. And then in the third row, you have sort. We're being asked to sort our query results by last name. So I'm going to click into the cell in the last name column, and we're on the sort row here. I will choose ascending. Remember, ascending is smallest to largest, or A to Z. Descending is the opposite. Part C, save the query using contact last name sorted as the name. Open the query in datasheet view. In other words, run the query and then close it, saving if necessary. Double check your typing when you are saving queries. As before, if you mistype the name of an object, the grading engine is not going to see that object and you will lose points. Okay, so take a moment, double check what you're typing, be careful, and be methodical. So remember, when I'm going to click save in the quick access toolbar, I'm not saving the database, I'm just saving the query here. And it's going to be contact last name sorted. Again, double check your typing. And then we'll go ahead and run the query. Query Design tab, Results Group, Run. And here you go. You can see how your results are sorted in ascending order by last name. And then we can go ahead and close this query by clicking on the X next to contact last name sorted. Moving right along, step 2, open the account billings query in design view. So I'm going to right click on the account billings query in the queries category here. Right click on accounts billing, choose design view. Make sure you can see your design grid. So I'll drag it up so I can see the design grid here. And now we're going to modify this query. Make the following changes to the query to select accounts with monthly billings over $500. So we have to add criteria here where the records have monthly billings over $500. First things first, in part A, delete the contact ID column from the design grid. So just like with Excel, I can use this downward facing arrow to select the column, and then we can just hit the delete key. There you go. Part B, add criteria to select only those records where the monthly bill field value is greater than 500. So you can see this criteria row here. And for monthly bill, the criteria is greater than 500. And this is what it's going to look like. Greater than, and then you type 500. Now, what if it's greater than or equal to? Well, you'll add the equal sign after greater than, and then it would be 500. What if it's less than? This is what less than looks like. Less than or equal to. Okay, hope that makes sense. But in this case, greater than 500. Let me show you real quick what this looks like when I run the query before adding the criteria. So right now I have all of my records here. But as soon as I add this criteria, greater than 500, watch what happens. Now when I go to run this query, I only have 8 results. Save the changes to the account billings query, open the query in datasheet view, in other words, run it, then close it, saving as necessary. So I'll go ahead and save, I'll run the query. This is what you should have, and then we can go ahead and close the query. Step 3. Open the high bill or contract query in design view. And you'll see that you have high bill and contract. Then there's high bill or contract. For this one, you're going to learn about compound criteria. What if you have multiple conditions? All right, so I'll right-click design view. And again, we need to bring up the design grid so we can see what's going on here. Add criteria to select only those records where the monthly bill field values are greater than 1,000 or the contract total field values are greater than 2 million. So in other words, we're looking for records where monthly bill is greater than 1,000. So just like in the last step, greater than 1,000 for the monthly bill. Or we want to find records where contract total is greater than 2 million. Now, this is an OR query, okay? What's the difference? Well, if I add my contract total criterion to the criteria row, and I already have this greater than 1,000 here, this becomes an AND query where both conditions have to be true for the results to display. But in this case, it's going to be one or the other. Either the monthly bill is greater than 1,000 or contract total greater than 2 million. Okay, so this is an OR query, and is where you have both conditions in the criteria row. But in this case, we have one of the criterion in the criteria row and the other is in the OR row. Go ahead and save and then run this query. You can see I have 6 results here. Let's continue reading the instructions. Save the changes to the query, open the query in datasheet view, confirm that 6 records appear in the high bill or contract query results, then close the query, saving if necessary. Of course, I have 6 records here. All right, so how are we doing? If you need a break, you do have that pause button. All right. We do have a lot to get through in this video, and I'm definitely going to edit this and try to minimize the amount of time as best as I can. But again, there's a lot to get through, so I do thank you for your patience. Moving right along, in step 4, open the contact birth query in design view and make the following changes to the query to list contacts with birth dates before January 1st, 1990. So we need to look at contact birth here. So we'll right click over contact birth, design view. As before, bring up the design grid. In part A, add the first name field to the query design grid. The first name field should immediately follow the contact ID field. So I will double click on the first name field in the contacts window. That adds it to the design grid. And now I need to pick up and drag first name to the left so that it is after contact ID and before last name. So you can see this line running here. Okay, this tells you where it's going to land. There you go. Part B, add criteria to select only those records where the date of birth field value is less than 1/1/1990. So they're basically telling you how to list criteria before a certain date. It's going to be less than. Now, if it's going to be after, let's say after January 1st, 1990, then it would be greater than 1/1/1990. But before, it's less than. Okay, so date of birth criteria less than 1/1/1990, as you can see here. Save the query and then run it. We need to go back. Okay, I spoke too soon here. So just want to show you, you can run the query, which just basically switches you over to datasheet view, and then we'll switch back to design view. So, I got ahead of myself here. Let's continue reading. Part C, set the format to medium date for the date of birth field. Now, to set properties, in this case for date of birth, I need to make sure that my cursor is somewhere in the date of birth field. Okay, I need to make sure date of birth is selected. Now, to get to properties, I need to open the property sheet. That's in the query design tab, show hide group property sheet. And you'll see that one of your items here in the grid is format, and it's medium date, as you can see here in the instructions. Again, part C, set the format to medium date for the date of birth field. Part D, set the caption of birth date for the date of birth field. So for caption, we will type in birth date, no space. And that brings me to my soapbox here. Now, when it comes to best practices, usually with field names, you don't want to include spaces. Or if you want to have a space, you use an underscore. Remember, with field names, no spaces, and you cannot start with a number. Okay, if you need to have a space, use an underscore. But with captions, this is where you make field names human readable, and you can include spaces. But for whatever reason, this project, this is our client. They want birth date with no spaces, so we'll have to give it to them. Okay, now I can step off my soapbox here. So again, format, medium date, caption, birth date for date of birth. Close the property sheet. And let's go ahead and save. Now when we run this query, you can see here's the birth date caption. You'll see that medium date format. So again, save the changes to the contact birth query, open the query in datasheet view, confirm that the results match figure 1, then close it, saving if necessary. So they basically want you to see there's birth date, there's that medium date format, and we could go ahead and close the query. Step 5, open the state city sort query in design view. So we'll right click on state city sort, open in design view. And make the following changes to organize contacts first by state, then by cities within each state. So what do you do when you have multiple sorting criteria? Well, you're going to see how it works here. And your first sorting criteria is what's called the primary sort or the major sort key. Your secondary, well, it's called secondary sort or the minor sort key. And you'll see how it works here. In part A, we're being asked to move the state field to the beginning of the design grid so that the order of the fields in the grid is state, city, first name, and last name. So we're going to pick up state. We're going to pick up state and move this to the beginning. So your primary sort or your major sort key needs to be to the left of your secondary sort or your minor sort. So remember, we are sorting first by state and then by city. Part B, sort the records in descending order by the state field. So in other words, highest to lowest. And in ascending order by city. So this is what your grid should look like here. Save the changes to the query, view the query in datasheet view, then close it, saving if necessary. So again, we're going to save this query and then run it. And as you can see here, your results are sorted in descending order by state. And then within each state, you have the cities listed in ascending order, as you can see here with Wisconsin and also with Washington. We'll go ahead and close that query. Step 6. Open the high bill and contract query in design view and add criteria to select only those records where the monthly bill field values are greater than 1,000 and the contract total field values are greater than 2 million. So we talked about this earlier with our OR compound criteria query. Now we get to see what the AND query looks like here. So we need to modify high bill and contract, right click design view, bring up the design grid. Now for this one, the criterion are individually both in the criteria row. Monthly bill greater than 1,000. And then with contract total, we're going to type in the criteria row greater than 2 million. Okay, so in this case, both conditions have to be true. Save the query, run it. You can see I only have one record here. Let's check. Save the changes to the query, open the high bill and contract query in datasheet view, confirm that one record appears in the query results. Sure enough, then close the query, saving if necessary. And just like that, we are done with high bill and contract. Step 7. Open the Florida contacts query in design view. So we'll right click Florida contacts, design view, and bring up the design grid. Let's continue reading. Change the criteria to select only those records where the state field value is FL in capital letters. So let's get rid of Ohio here. And you just need to type in FL. Notice the autofill that popped up. It's suggesting Florida contacts, but we're not interested. Now, you saw a moment ago how there were double quotes around Ohio. That's how Access remembers things. So we could just type in FL. That's the equivalent to equals Florida. We'll go ahead, save, run the query, and you'll see we have 4 records here. Let's double check in the instructions. Save the changes to the query, open the query in datasheet view, confirm that 4 records appear in the query results. Yep. Then close the query, saving if necessary. All right, so how are we doing, folks? Again, thanks for your patience and understanding. And if you need a break, you do have that pause button. All right, now let's get into wildcard queries. Step 8. You need to find a contact from a particular city, but you know only that the city name begins with BA. Open the contact city query in design view. So let's do that. Contact city, right click design view. And continue reading here. Add criteria to select only those records where the city field value begins with the letters BA. Capital B, lowercase a. So with a wildcard query in criteria, I can start typing the first few letters And then I will use the asterisk to indicate the wildcard. You can also do this when you're working with a search engine like Google or DuckDuckGo. You're looking for a particular word or phrase, and then you use that asterisk as a wildcard. So this is a wildcard query. We'll go ahead and save and run the query. And you'll see 3 records, 2 cities here, Bakersfield and Baltimore. Save the changes to the query, open the query in datasheet view, confirm that 3 records appear in the query results, then close the query, saving if necessary. Sure enough, we have 3 records here, 2 cities. We'll go ahead and close contact city. And that's how wildcard queries work. You can also look for cities that start with the letter B and then use an asterisk, and Access will return all of the records where the city starts with the letter B, okay? But in this case, we can go 2 letters, BA, and then use an asterisk, and so forth. Moving right along. Step 9. You want a query that displays the contact name rather than the contact ID for each account. Create a query in Design View based on the contacts and accounts tables with the following options. So what if you have more than one table? Okay, it's not so scary. You'll see how this works. Bear with me here. So we need to create a new query. Go to the Create tab, Queries Group, Query Design. And let me bring up the design grid here. And under Add Tables, let's switch over to Tables. And the 2 tables we're looking for here, Contacts and Accounts. Now you can click on Contacts and click Add Selected Tables and do the same for Accounts, or watch what I do here. Double-click Contacts, double-click Accounts, close Add Tables, and there you go. Now I'm going to right-click where it says Contacts in the Contacts window, Size to Fit. Same thing with Accounts, right-click, Size to Fit, so I can see everything here. You'll also notice that there's this join line connecting contact ID between both tables. You can see in the contacts table, contact ID is the primary key. And in the accounts table, you have the contact ID field that references contact ID in the contacts table. We'll get more into relationships later on, but don't worry about this join line. We'll get to that in a second here. Let's see which fields we need to add first. In part A, add the contacts table and accounts table to the design window. We've already done that. Part B, add the last name field from the contacts table to the design grid. So double click last name, boom, there you go. Part C, add the account number and contract total fields from the accounts table to the design grid. So we come over to accounts, and again, it's going to be account number and contract total. Double click account number, double click contract total. You can see in the second row here under table, last name field is in the contacts table, and then account number and contract total is in the accounts table. Part D we're going to skip, but let's go over it anyway. Part D, if necessary, join the contacts table and the accounts table by drawing a line from the contact ID field in the contacts table to the contact ID field in the accounts table. Hint, because the field names are identical in both tables, the join line may already appear in the design view. Do not attempt to recreate the line if it's already present. Okay, so in other words, do not try to recreate. Okay, so if that join line isn't there, you're just basically drawing between the 2 contact ID fields. Okay, but if it's already there, don't worry about part D. Now we can run this query, but first we need to save it as contact-account. So as before, go to the quick access toolbar, click save. You're going to name this contact account with the dash, check your typing, and you should see it here under queries. Let's go ahead, run the query. And you can see there's last name from contacts, and then you have your 2 fields, account number and contract total from the accounts table. All right, we'll go ahead and close out of this. Step 10. You often want to list contacts from a particular state, which varies depending on the information you need. Open the states parameter query in design view. All right, so let's do that. Let's right click states parameter, design view. Bring up the design grid here. This is what's called a parameter query. So again, open the states parameter query in design view and then modify it as a parameter query as follows. Part A, add parameter criteria to the state field to replace the current CA criterion. Let's get rid of CA. And here's how it works. The new parameter criteria should prompt the user with enter desired state as the text. So what we need to do here is enclose enter desired state in brackets. So this is a parameter query, right? You have some kind of text, basically it's instructions to the user, enclosed in brackets. That's all parameter query is. Save the changes to the query, and now let's go ahead and run it. So there's the prompt, enter desired state. Let's try Oregon when prompted, as you can see in part C. So we'll type in OR, and you can see there are your 3 results. Let's try another one. How about CA? Okay, there's your results. Or maybe we'll try Nevada. This time we get nothing because we don't have any records where Nevada is the state. Okay, so that's how a parameter query works, and it's hopefully straightforward. All right, so how are we doing? If you need a break, you do have that pause button. Again, thanks for your patience and understanding. Obviously, I'm going to edit this video and try to cut down on its running time. But again, there's just a lot to get through. So as before, if you need a break, you have that pause button. See you on the other side. All right, moving right along. Let's get into what a top values query looks like. Step 11, open the top values billings query in design view. So let's look for top values billings, right click design view, bring up the design grid, and we'll continue reading here. You want to list the accounts with the 5 highest monthly billings. Modify the query to sort the monthly bill amounts in descending order. So when you're creating a top values query, let's first make sure to sort the field you're interested in descending order. In this case, monthly bill. So we're going to sort this descending. Okay, so again, in the monthly bill field, go to the sort row, right, in this cell here, and you'll choose descending. Now, how do we make this a top values query? If you look in the query design tab, query setup group, return is currently set to all. We're going to change this to 5. So now when you run the query, you're only going to get the top 5. Now, of course, you could change this. You could type top 10, top 100. But first, let me show you what it looks like if it's set to all. Okay, this is what it looks like right now. Okay, you have all of your results in descending order, but again, remember, we're only interested in the top 5 here. So we'll choose top 5. And again, if you want something like top 10, you just type in 10. Okay, top 5. Save the query, open the query in datasheet view, then close the query, saving if necessary. So again, we'll save the query. Let's run it, and you should only get the top 5 records here. That's a top values query. Step 12. Open the annual payments query in design view. So here's annual payments, right click design view, bring up the design grid, and we'll continue reading here. Modify the query by creating a calculated field to determine the annual payment from each account. Now, here they tell you what to do, but I want to take a moment to explain something here. All right. If we go to this empty field, if we go to this empty column here and right click, you're going to see 2 options, build and zoom. Well, what's the difference? If we choose build, this brings up the expression builder. Now, this is helpful if you're not sure how to create expressions and you have quite a number of options here. Now, let's say you already know what you're doing, or perhaps you need to be able to see everything that's here in the field name, you can right click and choose zoom. Now, if you already have a calculated field, you can quickly modify things here. And that's the difference between build and zoom. So for this one, we're going to use the zoom dialog box and we're going to enter this calculated field. So we'll right click on this empty field and choose zoom. And now we're going to enter our expression. We'll start with annual payment. This is going to be the name of the field, colon, that's our separator, and then we'll enter the expression. Monthly bill times 12. Notice how the field name monthly bill is enclosed in brackets. This is actually a best practice. Whenever you're using field names, enclose them in brackets. Times, we use the asterisk just like in Excel, and then 12. So annual payment is monthly bill times 12. Again, if you can't see all the contents, we can right click and choose zoom. Or if you need the expression builder, right click, build, and there's the expression. Save the query, open the query in datasheet view, then close the query, saving if necessary. We'll go ahead, save this, and then run the query. You can see your new field here, annual payment. And by the way, you can't modify the value here. Okay, if you try to do it, you'll see this error in the status bar. Field annual payment is based on an expression and cannot be edited. So keep that in mind. Step 13, open the average billings query in design view. So we'll right click average billings, design view, bring up the design grid. Open the average billings query in design view and perform the following tasks to list the average monthly bill for all active accounts. Part A, add a totals row to the design grid. So how do we do that? If you go to the query design tab, show hide group, here's totals, and now you'll see a total row. Select average as the calculation in the total row. So instead of group by, we're going to choose average. And again, you can see a number of different functions here. Part C, set the caption to average billing for the monthly bill field. Bring up the property sheet and we'll set the caption to average billing, as you can see here in part C. I'll close the property sheet. Go ahead and save, and then we'll run this query, and there it is. Save the changes to the query, open the query in datasheet view, in other words, run it, and confirm that it matches figure 2. You can see there it is. We can go ahead and close the query. Step 14, open the contacts without accounts query in design view. Contacts without accounts, right click design view. And you can see that we have 2 tables here, and then there's a join line. So let's get into how this join line works. Perform the following tasks to identify contacts who are not assigned to accounts. Part A, change the join property for the relationship between the contacts and accounts tables to select all records from the contacts table and only those records from the accounts table where the join fields are equal. So let's take a look here. I'm going to right click on the join line and choose join properties, and you'll see I have 3 options here. Again, let's look at the instructions because they do tell you here. Select all records from the contacts table, and that's option 2 right here, and only those records from accounts where the join fields are equal. As you can see, we'll click OK. Part B, add the is null criterion for the account number field and add an ascending sort order on the last name field. So for account number, the criteria is null, which basically means it's empty. right? That's the criteria, is null. In other words, it's empty. Add an ascending sort order on the last name field. So we'll choose ascending for the last name sort. Go ahead, save the query and run it. Open the query in datasheet view, again, run it. Confirm that there are 23 records in the query result. You can see 23 records right here. Close the query, saving if necessary. All right, how are we doing so far? Hopefully this video is demystifying all the different kinds of queries you can do in Access. I know there is a lot here. Be careful and methodical. Take your time, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, how do we display unique values in a query? And that's where step 15 comes in. Step 15, open the unique states query in design view. Right-click design view. Modify the query to list all states only once. Save the changes to the query, open the query in datasheet view, confirm that there are 24 records in the query result. So in other words, 24 unique states. Close the query, saving if necessary. Well, let's see what happens when I run this query. So here's the issue, right? I have one record from Arizona. I have all these records from California, and then I have a couple of records from Florida, and so on and so on. I only want the states to show up once. So how do I do that? If I click somewhere where it's empty in the grid and I bring up the property sheet, you'll see unique values. Right now it's set to no. I'm going to change this to yes. Okay, see that? Unique values, set that to yes. Now watch what happens when I run this query. You can see I get 24 records, or in this case, 24 states. As a matter of fact, they do tell you here in the instructions, confirm that there are 24 records in the query results. Let's go ahead, save the query, and close it. And that takes care of unique values. Step 16. Let's get into crosstab queries. Create a crosstab query based on the West Coast table with the following options to list the total number of contacts in each city on the West Coast. So what is a crosstab query anyway? Well, if I go to the Create tab, Queries group, and I bring up Query Wizard, one of my options here is the crosstab query wizard. This wizard creates a crosstab query that displays data in a compact spreadsheet-like format. Well, let's click OK and see how this works. First, we need to figure out the table. We could also choose queries, or we can list both here, but let's continue reading the instructions. Based on the West Coast table, right? So we're going to choose table West Coast. We'll click next. Which fields values do you want as row headings? Part B, use the city field for the row headings. So I'll choose city and I'll click on the greater than symbol or the right arrow, however you want to look at it. Click next. Which fields values do you want as column headings? Part C, use the state field for the column headings. So I'll click state. So you can see how this looks right now, right? We have our cities as rows, and then we have states as columns. Click next. What number do you want calculated for each column and row intersection? Part D, use a count of the contact ID field as the calculated value for each row and column intersection, and include row sums in the crosstab query. Where it says, yes, include row sums. So contact ID count. So that's pretty much what we want here. And again, yes, include row sums. Click next. What do you want to name your query? Save the query using West Coast _ crosstab, the default, as the name. Again, when it comes to best practices, try to be consistent, but you know, this is our client here. We got to give them what they want, and I'll click finish. There's no need to save because I've already gone through the wizard and I've saved the query, but this is what a crosstab query looks like. So you can see the cities are individual rows, right? We'll start with Anaheim, and you can see here, total of contacts 1 from California. Bakersfield, total of contacts 2, both from California. So hopefully you see how this works. And I'll go ahead and close the crosstab query. All right, so how are we doing, folks? Again, if you need a break, you have that pause button, and thanks for your patience and understanding. Moving right along. Step 17, export the company's table as an Excel file with the name companies.xlsx to the same folder as the one that stores your database. Okay, so before we continue, let's talk about exporting here. Now, earlier I gave an example with the book publishing company that you can run a query where you have your customers' contact information. You can export all that to Excel, and then you can use, let's say, mail merge in Word where you already have a letter that you want to send out, and then you can bring in that contact information and send out multiple letters unique to each customer. So here's how this export process works. This is going to be based on the companies table, so I'm going to select the companies table. And if you go to the external data tab, export group, here's Excel, and you can see the file name, but remember, it needs to be in the same folder. So we got to choose browse here. And let's go to downloads. And I'll choose save. So there's the path. Let's continue reading through the instructions. Do not export the data with formatting and layout. So we'll leave this unchecked. Save the export steps using export-companies as the name. So we'll click OK. Save export steps, export-companies. And do not add a description, so we'll leave that blank. We're not interested in creating an Outlook task. We'll just choose Save Export. Now, if you need to modify this for whatever reason, you can click on Saved Exports, and there it is. Save the changes to the table and close it. Well, in this case, I don't really need to save changes to the table because I didn't open up companies. But if you want to convince yourself, right, if you want to take a moment to convince yourself, here's the company's table. And now let's go take a look at our Excel workbook here. So here it is. Okay, again, if you want to convince yourself. Step 18, hopefully you've downloaded your support file. Use the import spreadsheet wizard to import the data from the basically account data.xlsx support file and append it to the accounts table to add new account information to the database. All right, so let's take a quick peek here at accounts. Right now, you can see I have 29 records. Let's close the table. We're still here in external data. Let's go to import and link, new data source from file, Excel. And we'll browse. Here's the support file, choose open, and you'll see that you have 3 options. Import the source data into a new table in the current database. That's if you want to take what's in your Excel workbook and create a new table out of it. And as a matter of fact, let's look at the support file real quick here. Just want to show you. As a best practice, one of the things you want to do is be consistent with the field names. Otherwise, you're going to create extra steps for yourself if you are importing records into your database. So for consistency, make sure you're using the same field names. Otherwise, you're going to end up creating an extra step. All right, so we have these records here. I'll close out of Excel. In this case, I want the second option. I want to append a copy of the records to the table. And let's take a quick peek at the instructions here. We're going to append this to the accounts table. Okay, so we want the accounts table here. The third option is if you want to create a link between the Excel workbook and your database, but we're not interested in creating a link here. We want this second option. Append a copy of the records to the table accounts. We'll click OK. And again, very important that your field names match up. Otherwise, you have an extra step. So we're all good here. Click Next. Again, import to table accounts. Do not save the import steps. Open the accounts table in datasheet view, and it should contain 34 records. So we'll click Finish. Do not save the import steps, so we'll click Close. And here's the accounts table. We have 34 records. We're good to go. Close the accounts table. All right, 2 more steps and we'll be through. Step 19, rename the Washington Contacts query as California Contacts in the navigation pane so the query name reflects the results. So let's take a look at Washington Contacts. I'll right-click, go to Design View, and let's check out the design grid here. You can see the criteria is California, so we need to rename this. First, close out of the query. Do you want to save changes? No, I don't. Right-click on Washington Contacts, rename, and it's going to be California Contacts. So right-click, rename, double-check your typing here. It needs to be California Contacts. California Contacts. Last step, step 20, group the objects in the navigation pane by tables and related views. So where it says all access objects here, we're going to click on the down arrow and we'll change this to table and related views. And again, you can see how all of these queries are related to the contacts table. This is again why we can't just undo things in Access, because whatever you change in the table is going to affect all of your other objects. In this case, all of these queries you can see here with the accounts table, for example. Save and close any open objects in your database, compact and repair your database, close it, and then exit Access. Follow the directions on the website to submit your completed project. So as before, let's make sure that we don't have any objects open. Go to the File tab, click on Info, Compact and Repair Database. If for some reason you cannot compact or repair, just close out of Access, relaunch your project, and then you should be good to go. And remember, close completely out of Access. So at this point, we are ready to grade the project. And if you need a break, now would be a good time to hit that pause button. All right, time for the moment of truth. There was a lot going on with this project. And as before, depending on where you're at, and if you get something wrong, it depends if it's a simple fix. You know, maybe you need to change a criteria somewhere. Maybe you forgot something in the design grid. Or it could be a matter of having to delete the query that you created using query design and then just going through the steps again. But don't get rid of any queries that were already present. Okay, so you just need to go back in and make the correct modifications. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and submit our database for grading. And again, double check where you saved your Access database to. Okay, if you used file save as when you opened up your original start file, it might have been saved to documents. Okay, take a moment, double check where you're saving things. If you are saving to OneDrive, very important that you close completely out of Access. Make sure that your changes have synced. And then let's go ahead and submit. All right, let's grab that summary report. As before, we'll choose Keep. and you'll see your score report under reports. There it is, unrelated objects, grading report. And there you go, 100 out of 100. Hopefully this wasn't so scary. I know there was a lot going on, and again, I'll have to do some post-production on this video. I'll try to narrow it down as best as I can, but you know, there's no cliff notes or too long didn't watch. So thank you for sticking with me all the way to the end here. I wish you the best of luck with this project. Again, take your time, be careful, and be methodical. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you for one more walkthrough video. Thanks for watching.